Hello, everybody, and welcome. This week's What's Up Wednesday interview series, we're meeting with several guests of the network and share resources out to the industry if you're new here. That's what we're here to do. Today, we're meeting with Heather and Amber, who are program associates with Cooking Matters Colorado, to go over all things whole grain with us today. And they may look familiar and similar to you all. They were guests for our webinar in the past for the menu management on a budget back in March. So we're happy to have them back and welcome you too. Thanks so much for joining today.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So briefly explain, just to kick us off, kind of what your roles are and how long you've been with Cooking Matters Colorado.
Sure. My name is Heather Aguilar, and I've been with Cooking Matters for just a little over 6 years now. And I, before COVID, would be traveling the state of Colorado and implementing the childcare professionals classes, typically on full day Saturdays. And I would be getting to travel the state of Colorado and cooking with providers in person. But since then, we have transitioned to do shorter online sessions, which have been going really successfully. So I'm excited to be here to share a little bit of what we talk about in our sessions.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and my name is Amber Troutman. I've also been with Cooking Matters for about 6 years. And so now my job looks very similar to Heather's. I'm kind of Heather's counterpart in our Cooking Matters for Childcare Providers series in Colorado. But I will say that before that, I spent a lot of time in our Cooking Matters for Families and our Cooking Matters for Parents classes, which are very similar, but really focused on that audience. So that's another program that we have going on here in Colorado.
Perfect. Yeah, great. Thanks for that. So we'll kick it off here and get started with what is a whole grain. So if you want to share your screen now, we can pull that up.
Yeah.
Let's start.
All right.
Good deal. Okay, thanks so much.
Great. So yeah, I'm going to start us off and talk a little bit about this here. So a whole grain is a super important component of a healthy diet that provides so many nutrients for our bodies. And so if we were to look at a whole grain under a microscope, this is generally what we would find. So the three parts that you see here, the germ, the endosperm, and the bran. And so each part really includes a variety of different nutrients. The bran gives us our fiber and B vitamins. The endosperm gives us the energy, and then the germ is really, even though it's the tiniest part there, a little seed, it has so many important nutrients such as vitamins, proteins, minerals, healthy fats. So when a grain is refined, if a product is a refined grain, typically what happens is they're stripping off the outside bran layer, as well as removing the germ. So for example, white flour or white rice, those pieces are removed, leaving behind usually just the starchy endosperm, which is still important, but we're removing a lot of those other important nutrients. And so we're going to look at a couple of different products in a little while. But if a product is enriched, typically that means that they are going to enrich a white product with some synthetic vitamins, but it's never going to be the same quality as the natural whole grain product. And then we're going to share just a couple of examples of some really fun other whole grains that you may or may not be familiar with. I know I've probably only tried a fourth of these here.
Right.
But these are some really great options to get a lot of those nutrients that I just talked about there. And so, your oatmeal, you might be familiar with brown rice, wild rice, barley, corn. So these are all really great whole grain products. And oftentimes, typically, you'll just find them dry and then you cook them with water, similar to rice, and you can use them, in place of, like you could use barley instead of oats in your breakfast or something like that. So they're just kind of interchangeable that way and all have a little bit different flavor. So that is what a whole grain is.
Awesome.
Yeah, and something I like about the slide is that there are things on here that are familiar that sometimes we forget are whole grains. So like Heather mentioned the oatmeal, and I find it helpful to remember that all oats are actually whole grains. So even the ones that are quick oats, that cook in 1 minute or 2 minutes, they're just rolled flatter, so they can cook quickly, but they're still whole grains. So whole grain doesn't mean that they're going to take a long time to cook necessarily or anything like that. There's some on here that we probably already eat really regularly, like corn too, right?
Right, they just get kind of overlooked. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So you might be wondering, as we're thinking about these whole grains, like how do you know if something's a whole grain? Some of our grain aisles in the grocery store can be overwhelming. If you think about like the bread aisle or the cereal aisle, there are a lot of processed whole grains that we may be purchasing at the grocery store. So we have a couple of tips here for finding those whole grains at the grocery store. And what you want to remember is that the only way to know if a whole grain food is actually a whole grain or a grain food is a whole grain is to look at that ingredient list on the nutrition fact panel. So you want to your package over, ignore what it says on the front, and find that ingredient list. And it's typically towards the bottom of the label. I've seen some bread labels that it's kind of like out on the side, but find that ingredient list. And then you want to see the word whole or one of those whole grains that we just saw listed first on the list. Because ingredients are listed by weight. So we really want to see that whole grain as the first ingredient for that grain product. So for wheat products, you want to see the word whole so that it says whole wheat. And then for others, you may see the whole grain listed, such as brown rice or quinoa or spelt. Again, corn is a whole grain. So if you see corn listed and it doesn't say anything like degerminated corn, you can consider it whole. And then it's also helpful just to remember to ignore those things that are on the front. For the most part, they can be pretty tricky. So don't be fooled by all of those claims. You may see things that say multigrain or contains whole grain, and those things may be true. They can put those labels on the front because maybe there are multiple grains in that list. Or maybe there is a whole grain, but it may not be the first ingredient. So that's why we want to turn it over and look. So sometimes you'll see, I've seen a bread once where it contains whole grain, but you look and the first ingredient is just an enriched flour. And then down the list, maybe, 7th or 8th down the list, it says whole wheat flour. So that's like if you're making bread and you use 2 cups of white flour, and then you add a 1/4 cup of that whole wheat flour, you can say it contains whole grain, but we wouldn't consider that a whole grain product.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say if there's like a recommended brand or something to look for, but really that's not the case. Toss all of that and just flip over and look at the nutrition.
Yeah, and you can find even like store brands that are whole grain. So if whole grain breads can sometimes be more expensive, but there are generic brands now that are whole grain. So you can find some of those, or if you can find it on sale, whole grain breads do freeze well. So you can stock up on it when it's on sale, pull it out throughout the weeks. So that's what I want to do there. And I actually think I have a couple examples to show you because we wanted to just show how it can be really confusing. So you'll see things like this. We have the country white bread. We have a multigrain bread. And then we have the one that says 100% whole wheat bread. So if you're looking at this, which one would you guess might be a whole grain?
The 100% whole wheat, maybe.
Yeah. And then maybe the multigrain. I'm always fooled by that. It looks brown and it has like grains on it. But the only way we can know is if we flip it over. So we don't flip this over. And again, it might be kind of small on the screen, but for that country white bread, the first ingredient is enriched wheat flour. So not a whole grain. That multigrain bread is made with the same flour. It's made with enriched wheat flour. So that would not be a whole grain, even though it is multigrain. And if you look closer, you will see that eventually it says there's oats in there and some other things. So that's why they can say it's multigrain. And then the whole wheat bread is indeed the first ingredient of whole wheat flour. So that passes the test. And I think we actually, Heather might have another example for us.
Yeah, should I share that now?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so my product is, I'm trying to see if I can see it, is graham crackers. And so we use these a lot as examples in some of our snack recipes. So I did want to point out some graham crackers may be whole grain. However, this one is not. So if I zoom it up closer, you'll see that the very first ingredient says enriched, which means it is not a whole grain, but it is enriched with some of those vitamins I talked about earlier. And what I will say with this too is that for CACFP, it is an allowable product or grain product, but it is not necessarily a whole grain. And so
it's tricky.
Yes, definitely tricky.
Oh, goodness. Give me to pull that screen back up for you, Amber.
Sure. Although am I able to share some links in the chat, or is that helpful?
Yeah, you should be able to. Yep, go for it.
I'm just because we mentioned the CACFP accreditations, we have some worksheets that you can see. There's one in English and one in Spanish because their rules are a little bit different than our simple look for the first ingredient. You can go to and take a look at those handouts. It can be really helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great, especially for the food program participants. They'll be interested in that. Okay, perfect. All right. I was going to say, if people have any questions about these whole grains, where can they go to? Just your own website for Cooking Matters, or even just the program participants for the food program too?
Yeah, we actually, for some of these questions, it's great to use the food program resources. They're all through the USDA. So we use a lot of the USDA handouts, and we do have some of them on our website, cookingmatters.org as well.
Cool. Okay, I'll put that in there as well. Yep. Okay, perfect. If there's any other slides, feel free to continue. Otherwise, I wanted to make sure I could give you a chance to, give us your trainings.
Yeah, because we partner with CACFP in Colorado, we're able to offer these great trainings. We call them meal service trainings, and they're a partnership with us, Cooking Matters, CACFP, and Nourish Colorado. These are 2-hour trainings, and we have just one more coming up on June 12th. So we wanted to make sure that people in Colorado knew about it. These are best for centers or home-based programs that are eligible for CACFP. But we will share the link for signing up. It's through Eventbrite. Unfortunately, this is only open to Colorado providers simply because of our funding. But if you are in Colorado and you are eligible for CACFP, check that out. You do get some goodies for signing up, and then it's a really fun training. So yeah, that's coming up, and you do have to register for it by May 28th.
Okay, good deal. They've got some time for that then.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I just added the link to register in the chat there. And then, as Amber said, in this training, we will go into, well, not us, but our partner from CACFP, who are the experts. They will go really into detail about how to identify, which products are whole grain and which products are allowable and creditable on the meal program. And so it really is a helpful training as well.
Perfect. Great. Yeah, that's an awesome overview and a good promo for your training coming up. Okay, well, feel free to share any other kind of final thoughts or suggestions just regarding your whole grain topic for our network watching. And if not, we'll let you have your day back.
Yeah, I think just one more tip. I think whole grains are easy to incorporate. We always consider trying to make half of your grains whole grains. So if you're not used to whole grains, maybe take small steps. Maybe you're just swapping out one thing for another. Maybe you're finding that whole grain bread that you like and using that in place, but you're still, eating some of your other refined grains. So don't feel like you have to change everything at once, but small steps. Little small changes can make a big difference, and a lot of them can be incorporated the same way that we use any of our other grain products.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I know some grains are a lot, can be different as far as like maybe the kids, when you're serving, a whole grain noodle, really don't enjoy the whole grain noodle. So maybe you stick to the white noodle, but you try like a whole grain tortilla. So there's so many different products that you could try to see if you and your family enjoy them. And if not, like Amber said, you don't have to switch to all whole grains. So just a little bit is really helpful.
Sure.
Or even doing half and half. I've heard of like with the pasta, doing half whole wheat pasta, half regular, and kind of building a taste for it, just like any taste preference.
Transitioning,
slowly build it in. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate your time.
Yeah.
We'll see everybody again next week on next week's session. Bye.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.